DNA has been compared to a hard disk in a recently published earlier this year. And so the disk and DNA properties and their functional equivalences are all analyzed. And what is interesting is that just like a disk can have parts of the file at various places on the disk, in the same way, the DNA will specify where to collect the various parts from a gene. This goes a little more in depth than what the simplified version is, because some of the information in the DNA can be 1,000 nucleotides downstream from the one that you're working with currently, and all of it will be put together in the messenger RNA to create a protein. So not all proteins are as simplified as what we just mentioned. So anyway, the cell then can be viewed as a complete computational machine in terms that are akin to a multi-core computer cluster where there's a centralized memory and instruction set, and yet the computational tasks are distributed among the distinct processing elements. A system with centralized memory and multi-access capability leading to the distinct computational units. So we have a multi-computer shared memory system. Now when we look back at the information aspects again, and all of the bases are defined, all the possible codons are defined, and therefore it is discrete because all of the entire 64 codons that can be specified have meaning. So it's discrete. It's memoryless because there's no history of dependence. In other words, this sequence doesn't depend on some other sequence. And it's unconstrained because any symbol can follow any other symbol. One of the things, I don't know if you've ever heard about Francis Crick's central dogma or not, but he, back in the early days after he discovered the genetic code, said that information can flow from the DNA to the proteins, but not the other way around. That's the central dogma of biology. Information theory says that also, because information theory says you cannot transfer information from the 20-character protein alphabet into the 64-symbol codon alphabet. That's impossible mathematically. But one of the really interesting parts of that, and the implications of that, is that if there was a simpler, or a previous alphabet for life, because of the Shannon channel capacity, that previous alphabet would have had to have been at least as complex as the current codon alphabet. Otherwise, transferring the information from a simpler alphabet into the current alphabet would have been mathematically impossible. It would have exceeded the channel capacity, and by information theory that can't be done. And if you go back in time, what that implies is the very first alphabet that was used by life had to have been at least as complex as the current codon alphabet that's used by life. If we look at prescriptive information is algorithmic. It is a description that says these are the sequences of steps to do. So the algorithmic information becomes a little difficult to sometimes explain because, and they use symbols as well. There's a field of study called semiotics, and those are the sign systems. That is used in life. And prescriptive information means that you have computer algorithms that are contained in the various aspects of life, in the DNA code, in the RNA, in transfer RNA, for example, and so forth. And it's algorithms are always formal. There's nothing about an algorithm that has anything to do with physicality. Now you can implement an algorithm in computer memory. You can write it on a disk, for example. You can store the encoded algorithm in a physical medium, but the algorithm itself is purely formal. It's non-physical. Computer codes and algorithms, those are non-physical types of things. And so the idea that there's an interesting statement, no rational scientific basis exists for blindly believing in a relentless uphill push by mere physicality toward formal algorithmic optimization. Nothing in science says that algorithms by themselves can become more and more complex. There's also a big difference between self-ordering and self-organization. Self-ordering, things like tornadoes and vortices in a bathtub drain or something, those depend on physical laws, and the information in them is dependent on the information in the law. So there's very, very little information in a tornado, for example. There is a $1 million Origin of Life prize, in case anyone wants to get rich, that all you have to do is, that a prize will be awarded for proposing a highly plausible natural process mechanism for the spontaneous rise of genetic instructions in nature sufficient to give rise to life. And this has been offered for many years now and still being offered. So somehow life developed. So then what happens with life? Well, we have Darwinian biology is promoted all over the place. We're going to look a little bit about that. Richard Dawkins is probably the chief promoter of Neo-Darwin evolution. And he acknowledges, for example, that each nucleus contains a digitally coded database larger in information content than all 30 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica. He also says the way that Darwinism works is that each successive change in the gradual evolutionary process was simple enough relative to its predecessor to have arisen by chance. And he makes a rather interesting statement saying, even if the evidence did not favor it, that is, evolution by natural selection, it would still be the best theory available. And then he acknowledges one other thing that's very interesting. Mutation is not an increase in true information content, rather the reverse. So Dawkins acknowledges that mutation does not increase the information. It decreases the information. And so if you envision what he's saying and apply it, what he's really saying is that Darwinism says we have multiple sequential information losses that somehow produce an information gain that we require going from the lowest level of life to the top level of the biological tree of life. Sort of like the shopkeeper who lost a little bit on each sale but made up for it in volume.